This is the Waupaca County Board of Supervisors meeting.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
I will call our Waupaca County Board of Supervisors meeting to order. That's Tuesday, June 16th. We are in the lower level, room 42 at the courthouse here. I need to have roll call, please.
Supervisor Vasquez.
Here.
Boyer. Here. Mary Craig. Here. Patricia Craig.
Here.
Supervisor Ellis.
Here.
Fedowitz.
Here.
Golding. Here. Hardy. Here. Yeager.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Keppen.
Here.
Kussman.
Here.
Lear.
Here.
McClone.
Here.
Morak.
Here.
Muck.
Here.
Gerald Murphy.
Here.
Terry Murphy.
Here.
Newman.
Here.
Nygaard.
Here.
Pullman. Here. Ritchie.
Here.
Rowan.
Here.
Wengelski.
Here.
Will.
Here.
Zog.
Here.
Let the record reflect that Supervisor Spearings is excused. We have 26 members present.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Let's please stand for silent meditation and followed by the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I'd like to have a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Supervisor Lair and a second by Supervisor Zog. Any questions on the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Likewise, we have the minutes of the May 19th, 2020 meeting that you went through. We have a motion to go with that approval. A motion by Supervisor Pat Craig.
Second.
And a second by Supervisor Gerald Murphy. Any questions or discussion or additions, subtractions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried and the minutes of the May 19th meeting are approved. That brings us down to number 7, resolution. Resolution number 6, 2020-2021, Fox Valley Workforce Development Fiscal Years July 1, 2020 Consortium Agreement.
Now therefore be it resolved that the Waupaca County Board of Supervisors authorizes Chairman Dick Keppen to execute the consortium agreement for the chief elected officials of the Fox Valley Workforce Development Area on behalf of Waupaca County for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020.
A motion by Mr. Johnson for approval and a second by Mr. McClone. Questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion is carried. Resolution 7B. Resolution number 7, 2020-2021 CBG RFL Holes application for broadband expansion. From David Thiel, Economic Development.
I'm sorry, bear with me as I put this up on the screen. Now therefore be it resolved, the Waupaca County Board of Supervisors does hereby approve and authorize the preparation and filing of an application for the above named project, and that Waupaca County Board Chair is hereby authorized to sign all necessary documents on behalf of Waupaca County, and that authority is hereby granted to Waupaca County Economic Development Corporation to take the necessary steps to prepare and file the application for funds under this program in accordance with this resolution.
A motion by Fred Zog for approval. Is that correct, Fred?
Yes.
And a second by Mr. Vasquez. Discussion or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried and that resolution is approved. We're down to ordinances. Number 8, 2020-702, amendment to chapter 34, petition number Z-011-20, Town of Larrabee, Nyla Ewald for zoning map amendment from AR district to RR-O district on approximately 5 acres. There he is.
Kind of sideways, but that way the camera picks you up too, so.
No, this is perfect. Okay, so then what they're looking at doing is a rezone to a rural residential overlay. This isn't farm preservation, that's why they need that overlay designation. What they're looking at doing is consolidating their farm structures. So they're building a 4-acre parcel around their existing structures.
A motion for approval. Motion by Mr. Nygaard and a second by Mr. Quistman. We have some questions and discussion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, and that motion is carried. Item B is 2020-703, amendment to chapter 34, petition number Z-012-20, Town of Farmington. Mark and Dawn Anderson for zoning map amendment from an AR district to a RR-0 district on approximately 2 acres.
So the Andersons are looking at this rezone. Again, this is within farm preservation. That's why we have that rural residential overlay designation. What they're looking at doing is they're establishing a building site for a new home. And so they're using the one development right to create their 2-acre parcel.
We have a motion for approval. Yes, Mr. Mark, for approval. We have a second. Second by Mr. Wengalski. Questions? Discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is approved. Item C, 2020-704 amendment to chapter 34, petition number Z-013-20, Town of Farmington, Wilderness Mini Storage LLC for a zoning map amendment for RR district to RC-N district of approximately 0.88 acres.
So the people that own this parcel here, they own a parcel just directly to the east, and it's an existing mini storage business. And so with this this parcel off to the west, being it, since it's zoned rural residential, they're looking to get a rezone to a rural commercial neighborhood with the intention to combine it with their existing parcel to the east for the so they could have potential for expansion of their mini warehouse building business.
There's a motion by Mr. Fredwick for approval. Is that right? For approval, do we have a second? And a second by Supervisor Golding. Questions or discussion? Yes.
Could you explain why this isn't a light commercial? And I guess I just don't know why it would be under the rural residential, or if it wasn't a rural residential, why would this be considered light commercial if it's a business?
So it was an existing parcel here, the one that's marked and hashed there is the yellow. It's currently zoned rural residential, and the town has it planned as hamlet, and hamlet means a mix of residential and commercial. So that's why it's consistent with going to the rural commercial neighborhood. It made sense to the town, and it made sense primarily because they had that commercial right next door, and that's what they're looking to combine it.
After that, Mr. Ritchie. Any other questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is carried. Number D is create a Waupaca County Code of Ordinance, Chapter 53, Building and Building Regulations.
The correct one, right?
Yep. That's
Sorry.
familiar.
Big packet today, so
No,
bear
no,
with
no,
me.
you're good. So this ordinance here, chapter 53, what this is doing, this is establishing building inspection services within Waupaca County. And this is the ordinance that serves as a foundation for that new service. So this ordinance this is a template ordinance that we have found similar to what other counties have already used for when they have their own building inspection service. I believe we actually took this right from Waupaca County. They've had building inspection down there for some time now. So the process that we've had with this ordinance is we send it to Department of Safety Professional Services to make sure that it meets statutory requirements. We heard back that it does. And so we went to Legislative Judicial Ethics, Safety, and Security Committee, and they approved it. And we went to planning and zoning with it, and there was a couple of additions and changes that the planning and zoning committee had made that was different from what we had received or what was approved by LJUS. So if we could just scroll down quick, Jill, I just want to point out a couple things that are a bit different that LJUS, that wasn't what LJUS had. Can you just pause right there? So under, you see the 4.2C, where alterations, additions to building structure that are greater than 1,000, that's now 5,000. The idea with that is that building costs and material costs of where they're at nowadays, it's really easy to come up with $1,000 worth of cost for a home project. So it made sense to the committee, and it also made sense to the company that awarded the contract for building inspection to raise that up to 5,000. Scroll down, and you'll see that, stop right there. So the following construction activities shall not require a building permit. Detached 1 and 2 family accessory structures smaller than 200 square feet. That was one of the other changes that was made from LJUS to today with planning and zoning. The idea was that initially we weren't going to be inspecting accessory structures at all. And then we decided, in working with the company, that it made sense to have some level of inspection for pole sheds, garages, but we wanted to make sure that we're not inspecting small structures, like structures that you would see at like a Menards where they have like those plastic, little storage sheds. There's no need for building inspections or building permits for those. So any accessory structure that's going to be less than 200 square feet would not require a building permit. The other thing that we made as a change was windows. That was one of the questions that planning and zoning had, was if you're replacing windows for windows of the same size, does it require a building permit? And no, it doesn't. We're adding it in there to say that it doesn't require it. The only time it would require a building permit is if you're going to a larger size, or if you're going smaller, you won't need a building permit either. But you want to make sure that you're contacting the building inspection company, because if you make your window too small, you could be running against the proper sizing for ingress and egress. So those are the only changes that we had made. Beyond that, what this is essentially doing, this ordinance here, is it's giving this is basically the foundation for our building inspection company, who's going to be now handling the building inspection services within Waupaca County. Now, the one thing I want to mention too, in terms of jurisdiction, so this is going to be a county supplied service, but it's a voluntary for the municipalities. So if a municipality has a building inspector that they're happy with, that's fine. All this is doing is giving people an option. So if they're having issues with their current building inspector, or if their current building inspector is no longer in the business, or he's changing, whatever the case may be, if they're retiring, this gives an option.
I have a great question.
How much is this going to, cost? In other words, how is the position funded?
So there's no new actual county positions on this. The position, it's a contracted service. So their revenue is based on their amount of their building permits, their fees that they take in. So Waupaca County is going to be keeping 10% of the building permit costs, and that 10% is meant to cover future enforcement actions on our part. But in terms of actual cost to the county, there is no cost. These aren't county employees. There are going to be some incidental costs in the sense that they're going to be using there's a storage area down the hall here to the left that used to be where Land and Water used to be. They are going to be using that room for in courthouse appointments. One of the things that we're looking at with this building inspector service is to have the one-stop shop where people can come in, get their land use permit from our office, and then if they had to, they could talk to their building inspector downstairs. So they will be sitting down here. So there's going to be incidental cost with that in terms of electricity.
I would like to get that on the floor first, and we can ask questions. We have a motion for approval. A motion by Mr. Dog, and a second by Mr. Nygaard.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, we can have questions. Yes, Mr. Nygaard.
I was just gonna say what started this was, a number of the towns have contracted with their own building inspector and received somewhat short notice about that person getting out of the business. So they were left in limbo and needing something, and they approached the county, and that is what kind of got the ball rolling on this, was to make sure that something didn't fall through the cracks, and that other towns who are looking to be in a possible similar situation with age of their building inspector and lack of trained possibilities to fill these jobs, that we would kind of keep this going, offer this as a way to get it done. And it's, as Ryan was saying, it's budget neutral, as it is for the towns now themselves, because these building inspectors are working off the fees they collect. And so that portion is still the same. That's how it works. So,
Mr. Vasquez?
I was talking with Ryan earlier, and I think it's a point that should be made is that any ordinance that we make, this thing can be tweaked if we find certain little things that don't work for Waupaca County. It's sort of the framework. You have to get started somewhere. So if something doesn't work quite right, we can always come back and amend it and tweak it to fit better if we need.
Good point. Mr. Terry, you had a question?
Yeah, I got another point to point out that I thought was interesting. I don't know if we have problems with it here with it now. But the building inspector that we have will be assigned to Waupaca County. That's the deal with. You say there is a problem with them. He's contacted for building inspection, but you get to it that day for sure, early the next day. There's no waiting around for 2-3 weeks to see it.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Oh, Supervisor Questman.
I think one thing is to be noted too, that Waupaca County's been using this firm for quite a while, and they're very happy with them. And we met with them this morning via the internet, and they want to really do a good job for us. And I have a real good comfort level personally with the people that we're dealing with here. Not only the owner, but the zoning guy that's going to be working our county. He seems like he's the guy that wants to get along with people, and he wants to do a good job for us. And I think being that we've got some history there with a local county, I think that means a lot.
Thank you, Dennis. Mr. Federowicz?
The other thing that struck me that this was beneficial is it's probably the first time we'll be able to have the building inspector and our planning and zoning all in the same building. So if there's a question, it can be resolved right away. Otherwise, planning and zoning did something, and then the inspector was doing something, and now everybody will know what's going on at the same time. I think that's a great plus.
Good point. Anybody else have any questions or discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. That motion is carried. Item E, amend Chapter 32, Waupaca County Shoreline Protection Ordinance. Listed amendments can be obtained in the county clerk's office for planning and zoning office.
So the only change that we're looking at for the shoreline protection ordinance is that we're adding in the data set for the areas to be regulated, and that's the Department of Natural Resources Surface Water Data Viewer. We already utilize that as one of our data sets that we use to determine whether or not a water body is in fact navigable or not. So we're just adding that in there for clarifying that.
Okay, do we have a motion for approval? There is a motion by Supervisor Lair for approval, is it?
Yes.
Okay, we have a second by Mr. Mark. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
All in favor?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we get off
I'm
that.
glad that because I'm going to forget how to do roll call and you're going to be right on top of it.
Okay, we're down to F, then chapter 34, Waupaca County zoning ordinance. Listed amendments can be obtained in the county clerk's office or planning and zoning office.
Okay, so in chapter 34, there was several small things changes that we had made. I won't go through all of them. I mean, unless that's something that you guys would prefer. But in terms of just hitting some of the big points of the areas that we've gotten most feedback on. The first thing that I want to take, we have the cul-de-sac. We added in the definition there, the end of highway having one outlet and turnaround for safe, convenient reversal of traffic movement. One of the other things that you'll see in this revision is that we've added in a lot of diagrams in terms of how we measure setbacks or roadway setbacks off of a cul-de-sac, or if a dead-end road just terminates at a straight line, how do we measure roadway setbacks off of that? And how do we measure setbacks if you're a last parcel on a private road? That's something that we've been having issues with over the years here, is clarifying how that actually gets measured. And so we added in those clarifications. One of the other things that we had gained a lot of feedback was we now have a new use added in here for standalone parking lots. This came out of the town of Farmington. That town, there's an issue there where there's the King area that needs parking. And so there's a couple of projects there that got brought up where they were looking at doing standalone parking lots in that area. And we didn't have anything in the ordinance that allowed that. And so that's why we included this in our revision package. That did receive a lot of feedback from people, landowners within the town of Farmington and the town of Dayton. What we ended up doing was following our initial meeting that we have, whenever we have these revision packages, we present them to all the towns, and following that meeting with the towns, we met with the town of Farmington and Dayton on this particular issue. And also we met with them on another issue that they had in terms of average setbacks off of highways. One of the things that we're adding in here too is we have a roadway setback of 30 feet from the right of way. We have a new provision in here, or a provision, I should say, that we're clarifying to make it easier to use the setback reduction. One of the feedback we've been getting from Dayton and Farmington is that they think that they feel like our regulations are forcing houses closer to the water, when it doesn't make sense to do that in terms of water quality. We're trying to keep it as closer to the road as all possible. We met with Highway a couple of years back, and they had said that 20 feet to the right of way is the least amount that they would need for safety. So we clarified in this revision package here or to make it easier to actually use average setback. So what average setback actually is if you already have structures within the roadway setback on either side of where you're proposing your structure, you can use those structures. You can use that smaller distance. So that way it's consistent, rather than having the one building be 30 feet back and the other ones be, say, 20 feet or 25 feet. So it allows for a reduction in our roadway setbacks. So that is based on some concessions that we made in the office working with the towns. They were agreeable to those changes. Is there any other questions? And specifically, there's quite a few things that we have in here.
You'll get it on the floor. Do we have a motion for approval? There's a motion by Mr. Nygaard and a second by Mr. Terry Murphy. Questions or discussion?
Could you explain and then standalone parking? We're regardless of that, as you know, but it doesn't mean, if it's in a residential area like that, all they have to do is contact the township, their level. Is that, could you explain that?
Sure, yeah, I'll explain so the provision that we have for standalone parking is that it's required to be in our commercial districts. We have 2, rural commercial neighborhood and rural commercial general. Once it's in those districts, it requires a conditional use permit. So the reason why we put those in commercial districts is because the way the towns are planned, it would also require a comprehensive plan amendment, because in order to rezone into rural commercial neighborhood or general, you would have to have a planned commercial as well. And the vast majority of the areas in these towns are not planned as commercial, or they have very, very specific areas that they have planned as commercial. So what it does is it adds an extra layer of protection for those areas that they don't, if they say they don't want to have these parking lots, it gives the town the ability to deny it. The way rezones work and comp plans work is if the towns were to decide to deny it, it doesn't go to the planning and zoning committee. That's the difference with a conditional use permit. If a conditional use permit goes to the town and the town denies it, it still goes to the planning and zoning committee for ultimate approval. So it gives the ultimate level of protection for the towns if they don't want standalone parking. They can just deny the conditional, deny the rezone or the comp plan amendment.
Any other questions? Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. And that motion is carried. Okay, we're down to G, correct? Amend Chapter 37, Waupaca County Subdivision Ordinance. Listed amendments can be obtained in the county clerk's office or the planning and zoning office.
So the only change that we're making to the subdivision ordinance relates to sailor exchanges. Sailor exchanges is the legal term that's more commonly known as boundary line adjustments. The whole point of a sailor exchange is meant to be that you have an issue with your neighbors, say you accidentally put a structure over a line, or you just want to swap some land between neighbors. That's the idea of a sailor exchange. So this provision that we're adding in here, if a remnant parcel exceeds 20 acres in size, a deed with a perimeter description of the remnant parcel will not be required. What we're doing is we're bringing sailor exchanges into consistency with the way we're handling certified survey maps already. So certified survey maps, in terms of applicability, you don't need to get a certified survey map if the lot's over 20 acres. So we're doing the exact same thing with sailor exchanges. So, and one of the comments that got brought up when we took this to planning and zoning this past Tuesday was, why would we still be requiring a deed for that? And so we put that in there to say that the deed is actually not going to be required, because that was not the intention of this. The point is that if you have a remnant parcel greater than 20 acres in size, it can just remain as is.
Supervisor Lair? Motion for approval? Sarah, leave him, oh, he's hiding behind it. Oh,
Second it.
second it, thank you.
Trying to be not noticed.
Questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Item H is amend Chapter 38, Waupaca County Non-Metallic Mining Ordinance. Listed amendments can be obtained in the county clerk's office or the planning and zoning office.
So the addition that we're making to the amendment we're non-metallic mining ordinance relates to the fishing asset rule. So you'll see the change we're taking out, expanding beyond the boundaries defined in the current reclamation plan. Essentially, with that language, ran us into trouble with the diminishing asset rule. And so what we're doing is we're essentially saying that if the requirements are to apply to Indian oil operators, non-metallic mining sites within Waupaca County, as long as they have other conditional use applications have been approved prior to the effective date of existing mines that are legal non-conforming. So essentially, if your mine is considered legal non-conforming or grandfathered, then the ordinance does not apply to you. And further in this exemption section, we're further clarifying to say that a legal non-conforming mine operating in accord with a common law diminishing asset rule is considered exempt. And also, we're just adding this is statutory language that a non-conforming use is discontinued for 12 consecutive months or any future use of building structure or property shall conform to the ordinance. So then what that's saying is that if you are in fact grandfathered or legal non-conforming and you discontinue that use for 12 months, you lose that grandfathered status. That's a statutory provision.
Motion by Mr. Johnson for approval. Mr. Zog seconds it. Yes. Question, Pat Gray.
You took out expand beyond the boundaries defined in their current reclamation plan.
That's right.
Do they still have to file a reclamation plan if they expand their boundaries? Is that in a different part?
They still have to, yes, they still need to get a reclamation plan and they still need to update the reclamation plan based on their active acres and non-active acres. Yep. And that's all part of, that's not in this ordinance.
Part of the reclamation.
Exactly, yep.
Okay.
And our 135.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay, down to reports. Our HR Director, Mandy Welch, is in the building, and she'd like to discuss the return to work transition plan policy.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mandy.
We wanted to give you an update of kind of what's been transpiring through this whole COVID-19 and what we've done with some of our employees. Back in the middle of March, department heads had worked on seeing if there's any of their employees that could work remotely and if that's the possibility to be able to do that. So several of our departments were able to do that and have staff work remotely, working with IT if there was technology needs. So that's kind of where we've been at. And if you had this in your packet, you can see our transition back to have everybody back to work is by the end of the month, June 30th. So during this time where we did the working from home for certain individuals, and of our 400 employees, we had about 120, just so you have an idea of how many were able to work from home. Predominantly health and human services, but another number of employees from different departments that were able to work remotely. So the transition plan is to get everybody back to on-site work by June 30th. And then as part of this whole process, we put together an interim emergency telework policy. So that covered us kind of in the interim emergency situation that we had here. And now we'll be talking about, do we want to telework in the future? What are the pros and cons and all of the questions? Working on that with a group of folks to be able to put something together to bring forward through committees to see if that's something we want to do in the future. And then to make sure we have all of our liabilities covered and we think about all the efficiencies and all those unanswered questions that we've learned kind of through this process, what some of the stumbling blocks are, what some of the advantages are. So we'll be able to incorporate those things in the coming months and hopefully have something possibly by the end of the year that we've kind of worked out all the bugs and we'll be able to share with folks. So we just want to give you an update on all of that. As far as every piece of this, the first part is facilities and cleaning, and that's really Ron Hansen, our maintenance director, has done just a fabulous job. All the little things that you could possibly think of for cleaning. You'll notice in the bathrooms, there's like toe pulls so people don't have to use their hands on the doors. There'll be sneeze guards installed on the front counters, which will allow that to open up. Just a whole bunch of things that behind the scenes that Ron's done and his staff have done a great job of. So that's kind of all laid out in there. Of course, the big thing is social distancing. Just like all of you are here today, we're trying to practice that in our workplace so that folks are separating themselves and distancing meetings. And there's things you can do again. Phone call, conference calls instead of face-to-face meetings, trying to do those sorts of things. So that's the big piece of social distancing. And then it has resulted in some workplace modifications. So if you've got cubicles or workstations that are a little too close together, we've tried to separate those in some areas where that was a concern. For areas that you're meeting with clients, you're meeting with individuals that can't social distance, we ask that you wear a mask. So those are some of the things that we're practicing when it comes to social distancing. And then personal protective equipment, that's your face masks and things like that. Some of those supplies have been very difficult to get a hold of, so we're utilizing those where we're able to get those supplies. We also have been very fortunate for a lot of our employees. Megan Waller up in Branch 1, her daughter and her grandmother have been making all the cloth masks that we've been handing out in our office that quite a few of the employees have picked up, or maybe some of you also through our office. So I just want to thank her and her family for doing all of that. That's been great because those masks have not been easy to get a hold of. The other thing that came up that has kind of been a talking point that I just want to touch on is what are we doing as people enter the building for the public? So lots of discussion about should we be taking temperatures? Should we be requiring masks of everybody that enters the building? So we've had some discussion around that and come to the consensus that there's so much different data out there about masks. Are they good? Are they not good? Can temperatures fully detect every situation or not detect every situation? So at this point, we're saying it's not required to wear a mask in the building and we're not taking temperatures of staff. If things should change, maybe that's something we'll consider in the future, but that's not something we're doing for everyone entering the building. Telework, I touched on that. We're transitioning back between now and the 30th of the month. We've had some questions around, will we allow telework in a couple of other situations? And I just want to mention a couple of things. We have a fair number of expecting mothers that are working here at the courthouse building. And so there's been some questions kind of based on their due dates. Would they be allowed to telework a couple weeks longer? We're into the summer months here. In those situations, we have said we would do that for some of the due dates are a week to 2 weeks out beyond June 30th. So there are a couple of situations for telework that we've made a couple of exceptions to beyond the June 30th date, but very few when it has to be for obviously a particular specific situation. And some of those, why I bring up that particular situation, is some positions are requiring a 2-week quarantine prior to delivery of a child. So not in every situation, but just want to let you know that that's something we're trying to do consistently across all of those particular folks. And again, for whatever reason, we have quite a number of them between now and the middle to end part of July. So just want to be considerate of those because there's been a number of questions on those. Travel restrictions, that's been another topic. We've heard probably all of you heard on the news and heard everywhere, should you have travel restrictions or not? So as of May 26th, we no longer have any travel restrictions. However, individual departments, depending on the nature of their employees' work or their amount of individual contact that they have, they may choose to implement a quarantine or a restriction depending on where their employee has gone. So for example, if you had an employee that works in the jail and they went to Italy, obviously the sheriff would very likely want to quarantine that individual. But obviously beyond that, it's really a case-by-case situation. An expanded family medical leave. Back in the earlier part of the year in March, the federal government passed the Families First Coronavirus Act, which provides 2 benefits. One is expanded family medical leave. So right now, family medical leave, you have 12 weeks for the birth of a child, your own serious health condition, or that of a family member. They expanded that beginning April 1st between now and the end of the year, April 1st to the end of the year, that you can have that expanded family medical leave for childcare or homeschooling. So those particular situations, you can get 2/3 pay. And again, we don't get any refund, at least at this point, we think, for providing those benefits. But we have had individuals apply for and utilize those benefits either while they didn't have their childcare because it was closed or because they had children at home that they were homeschooling. So that benefit is in place until the end of the year, and we have to comply with all of that. That also provides for pay if you yourself have COVID positive and you have to quarantine, or you're being quarantined, maybe you don't have it, but you're being tested, that you are allowed 2 weeks emergency paid sick leave under that act, paid at 100% of your pay rate. So those couple of benefits are out there that we have had a number of employees utilize and probably will into the fall, depending on what happens with schools and the daycare and things like that. And then also we get into the procedure if you have a positive employee that's been at work. We've not had a positive employee that we know of. We have had situations with family members or close contacts where we kind of manage through those situations depending on the circumstances. If we were to have a positive employee, that's been a lot of the question. What are we gonna do? Are we gonna close the courthouse? Are we gonna evacuate? We'll work with public health on whatever the situation is. And definitely there would be some cleaning and things like that to ensure that it's a safe environment for people to return to. So we'll just deal with those as they happen and we'll keep you informed along the way. And then of course, the last section of that is employee responsibilities. So it's all our responsibility as supervisors and managers, employees, to make sure that we're hand washing and social distancing and all the things like that that we're supposed to do to keep everybody safe. Everybody here has been just great. We obviously have some folks that are on differing levels, just like you may have amongst your family, friends, and the general public about how they feel about all of this. And some people are very concerned about coming back into the building or having contact, and others maybe not so much. So we're just trying to provide a safe workplace so that people can feel safe coming to work, especially as they transition back. That's kind of.
Supervisor Boyer.
I was at public property yesterday and Ron went through the list of things that they've done. And it's amazing. I mean, things like the elevator. I never gave that a thought, you know, are they gonna have 2 people in the elevator or 1 but I think they thought of everything. It's amazing.
Other questions? Supervisor Craig.
So are you saying, and you didn't say it, is the courthouse returning to what we all consider as normal on July 1st then? If June 30th, we're expecting our employees to be back so that the public can come in because we'll have the tables and the plexiglass and the sanitizers and the whole thing. So are we expecting then that it'll be back to, I want to say normal in the sense that you can come in and ask a question, or are they still requiring appointments for people?
We've been open throughout the whole thing, although we've encouraged people to make appointments or do certain things by appointment. The expectation is, yes, we're transitioning all of that back. It's going to be different. I know the sneeze guards or whatever Ron's calling those plexiglass shields have been on back order, so whether they'll be here by July 1st installed, I don't know. The folks across the front have decided the gates will stay down and the tables will set up until those things are in place. But for the most part, I think we're all transitioning back, and hopefully, yes, by the first part of July, we'll be back to the new normal.
Thank you.
Supervisor Nygaard.
Thank you. Just throwing out some questions. So if there is a flare up towards fall or winter again of more cases, and there is possibly somebody, an employee of the courthouse that is positive, just wondering what options we might have as far as maybe improving the work from home ideas. I just see how private business has been making this work for certain employees with accountability and things. And then the work from home thing intrigues me in that now now you've got some that are going to be going on maternity leave. And I'm just wondering, 9 months from when this lockdown started, if there's going to be a few more. So
find out.
If we can keep good employees on the payroll and productive, and the work gets done, and just in case we get a lockdown again, that we aren't trying to figure out what to do, but we can keep things moving.
Yeah, definitely. And I know through all of this, Brent has done a great job too, I should say, with all of the technology stuff, but questions have come up about what things would we do a little bit differently, what things do we have to make sure we shore up before we go in that direction, but definitely it's something that we want to work with. Ryan from Planning and Zoning, Brent and I have kind of talked things through a little bit, would be part of that committee of putting something together, bringing it back to department heads. But yes, we're not going to put it on the shelf and say, well, we'll deal with this if it comes up again. We definitely see the benefit of that, especially when you start thinking long-term. And I know you've all heard about the facility study for the building and what does that look like? Would that look totally different if we could have several employees working remotely? Probably. So all those things being taken into consideration. And then you get into a whole host of technology things that servers and licensing and all that kind of thing that, Brent brought up some really great points when we were talking. But yes, definitely. But we're not against that in any way. It's just we want to make sure we've got everything covered and all of your questions and concerns addressed too.
The sheriff would know about the county, but I know in Clinton, we've seen domestic disputes are up too. All that stuff happens after they make up. Oh, Mr. McClellan?
So if I'm a department head and there's certain things going on in my department, can I give direction? Let's say as a department head, I felt like we need face masks. Can I say that to my people in my department?
Yep.
Good. And then the second thing I worry about is, are we in depth looking at a plan in case this keeps growing? I don't know where we're going to be at in 2 months. I hope it's nothing. But I'm just dead serious. Personally, myself, I believe that you got to social distance. You got to wash all the time. You got to wear a mask when you're in unknown territory. And I'm a real believer in the COVID, in the 95 mask, because there is research that you won't get it from someone else. You know what I mean? Or just a plain mask, you can get it. You can get it from someone else, but you're not going to give it up. So I'm a real believer in that. But thank you.
Supervisor Ritchie?
What is your policy as far as if someone does come down with it, as far as the people that they've come in contact with, you shut down an entire apartment, or how does that work?
We're going to work closely with public health on all of that, so whatever, their recommendations are, depending on how many contacts the individuals had, how many different places within the building they've had, so it would depend. If they're in a more consolidated area, it might just be that area that needs to be dealt with, versus if it's somebody that's traveled throughout the building, that might look a little bit different. So we're going to rely on public health for their guidance through that.
Supervisor Gerald Murphy?
Yeah, this whole idea of working at home or working here, and that Mandy and I have talked about that at some length, and your questions from around the room just reinforce our concern that we need to get together a committee and form a policy over some study and all that, which is best for Waupaca County, and try to avoid any loopholes or any pitfalls and that. But it's not something you can do overnight. You throw something together in a hurry and you end up suffering from that particular policy that wasn't well thought out. I'm sure Mandy and her group realize that, and they will go ahead and they will explore all options. They will explore all pitfalls. They explore all possibilities as well as advantages. And they'll come up with something that is going to be very good for Waupaca County, but it's not going to be overnight.
Supervisor Lair?
Yeah, the only concern, and Mandy, my concerns on this is the confidentiality and also workers' comp. We really, if you have this committee that Jerry's sort of asked for, suggested, I think those things have to be brought up, because if individuals decide that they're working at home, we need to do a thorough investigation of their work site, and that they solely are working and not going out feeding their cattle, and taking care of their kids and taking them to daycare or wherever. I think we really need to study that and really have it, because Mr. Romanesco told me that they're seriously thinking about, formulating a policy, but we really have to have it. Can't have loopholes.
Yeah. Those are definitely two areas, and Jan referred to Todd Romanesco, who's the administrator and Health and Human Services Director at Calumet County, and he was with us last week, and he's on our group of folks that we communicate with. So every county, some counties already had a telework policy. A lot of counties don't, and so we're sharing information and asking questions back and forth. But workers' comp is one of them, because there is liability for that. And then also the confidentiality point. So folks that have access to personal health information that's private, that's going to have to be addressed. Brent has to deal with any IT issues related to HIPAA. There's training for that. There's all sorts of sign-offs. There's quite a bit of some of the policies I've seen so far when it comes to HIPAA and those confidentiality. Are you working at your kitchen table versus do you have a private space within your home to do that? Is it secure? If you're on the phone and you're talking clients' names, is that secure? You know, all sorts of different things like that. Once you start talking about all of this, it's a lot more complex than you initially thought. But again, we have lots of network across all the different counties and are sharing information and questions. And then the other piece of that, that we talked a little bit about is that what's it like to manage a group of employees remotely? That's a different style of management than it is on site. And so that's some training that we may want for managers and supervisors too. What does that look like? What are things to be mindful of? How do you keep staff engaged and motivated and all that sort of thing?
Any other, yes, Supervisor McCollum.
Couple final comments. Dr. Zach Baseman, who was in the county postage last week, is doing a presentation on data care on this topic at noon today, and you can get it on Facebook on the data care. Zach is my personal doctor. I followed him a while ago. He's a great doctor, but I mean, he's probably going to take in perspective what we're hearing and what we don't know. And I know Mandy said, you know, some masks we believe in, some we don't. I feel the same. But maybe if we get something from somebody local, we'll have a better idea. And I hope department heads can get into Facebook at noon today. I'm not a Facebook guy, but I'm going to pull up data here and see what I come up with. But I think it's food for thought. I think it's good for everybody if you pay attention to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Very interesting. You know, the problem is that every doctor, not every, but many doctors have different opinions. Mine is very liberal in Appleton. He's a specialist, and he's been saying we're way overdoing everything. And he told me that I've got to get in contact with the virus. So either I'm going to be immune to it, or I'm going to get a cold with it, you won't even know it. Or you're going to get the flu for a couple of weeks, or you're going to die. And he says, and you're a candidate for dying, Kevin. So, but I mean, that's the way he feels. But every doctor actually has different opinions. And so I have a very liberal opinion, even though I'm, which I say, a suspect because of cancer for 10 years and COPD, breathing, and bronchitis. I'm a real candidate. Hey, I always figure if I'm not strong enough to fight it off, I guess my room is ready someplace. So, any more, Mandy?
Nope, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
I didn't know you were local.
Well, we used to be friends, huh? Thanks, Mandy. Okay, County Board monthly report. Really, I don't have a lot other than going on rants about what the last subject was. And I have to say that Supervisor Hardy came to me and also said, Dick, sometimes you have people come and speak to the county board, other than county board business, and we do. And she's lining up a one or two, and I said this would be great to have after the budget's done. We're looking for something to get our mind cleared. And in fact, I ran into Mr. Terry Murphy. He said he ran into Jack Bennett. You remember Jack Bennett came and talked to us at one time. And of course, his brother Dick came, what, last year? I think Dick came here. And then they put pressure on me, and then to get Tony here from. I don't think that's going to happen. But I appreciate the suggestions that I get. Next month, however, we're planning on having two special guests. That's Mark O'Connell and Kyle from the WCA going to come here for a presentation. So it may be a little longer meeting, but it's going to be very informative. And of course, we'll be able to ask both questions. I don't know what they're going to talk about. That's up to them, but I certainly will hear that what's happening at the Capitol and WC around the state. I'm sure we'll hear some more of this panic stuff. So I look forward to next month, hopefully. So with all that being said, let's go on to appointments. Jill?
The first one, 10A, appoint Supervisor Spearings to the Park and Rec Committee to replace Supervisor Harding.
Is there a motion for approval? Motion by Mr. Dodd, second by Mr. Moore. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried.
Second appointment, 10B, appoint Gary Marks as an alternate to the Board of Adjustments for a 3-year term.
A motion by Supervisor Terry Murphy and a second by Supervisor Nygaard. Any questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried.
10C, reappoint Supervisor Patricia Craig to the Board of Adjustments for a 3-year term.
Motion by Supervisor Lair and a second by Mr. Nygaard. Questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Carried.
10D, reappoint Supervisor Johnson to the Board of Adjustments for a 3-year term.
Motion by Supervisor Craig for approval, a second by Supervisor Gerald Murphy. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried.
10E, reappoint Jack Fulcher to the Board of Adjustment for a 2-year term.
Motion by Supervisor Johnson for approval, and a second by Supervisor Newman. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried.
10F, reappoint Art Richardson to the Board of Adjustments for a 2-year term.
Motion by Supervisor Nygaard for approval, and a second by Supervisor Golding. Questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that is carried.
10G, reappoint Penny Leader to the Board of Adjustment for a 1-year term.
Motion by Supervisor Federowitz and a second by Supervisor Quistman for approval. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that is carried.
Okay. 10H, reappoint Judy Muck as a citizen member to the Health and Human Service Department Board for a 3-year term.
Supervisor Janet Lair for approval, and a second by Supervisor Murphy. Questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried.
And final appointment, 10I, appoint Carmen Rebo as a citizen member to the Regional ADRC Advisory Committee for a 3-year term.
There is a motion by Supervisor Lair for approval, and a second by Supervisor Murphy. Questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Announcements, Jill?
In your package, you have the 2021 budget manual that was approved by the Finance Committee for your review. The Governor's proclamation for the Wisconsin Register of Deeds Week, which is June 7th through the 13th. The WCEDC May report, and on your desk was the Forward Analytics June 2020 issue.
Okay, and we're down to the motion for adjournment. The motion by Supervisor Lair and Supervisor Zog. We are adjourned, and that's undebatable. Just a reminder that our technical committee starts at 10:30, right here.